Didn't feel like the last day before fall, did it? How hot did it get? 99, 98? Ooh. I didn't get out of the church building today, so Tina was talking about how hot it was in car riders today, and I told her, I said, I guess the good thing about being locked up in the counseling room is you don't know how hot it is. So anyway, it's been a long, tiring day, but I'm good. Sure is good to be here with you. We got one more week. Are you tired of it? Ready to move on to something else? The ones who are wouldn't nod yes just because you're too nice, aren't you? It's been good to be at Southgate. I look forward to coming and visiting with so many of you all each week and enjoying visiting with friends and making new friends, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to do this. I am changing the schedule a little bit, just dividing these last two a bit differently as I looked at the content for tonight, and next week I decided that it would work better to do part of what's on the schedule for tonight, and then we'll do the second part of that, and the last section on the importance of protecting the blessing of marriage as we draw it to a close next week. Thank you. You all have been so kind and complimentary. More importantly, I hope that the emphasis that's has been given to family and marriage, and will continue to be these last two sessions, truly will strengthen families and strengthen marriages. That's the goal in the effort completely. And so let me turn this on. And so tonight we're going to deal with the matter of understanding and accepting that my spouse is different from me. Now you may look at that and think, well, that's kind of obvious. Why would we need to spend a whole session talking about something that we already know? Well, because so often in the counseling room I see couples where we have a hard time understanding why he or she feels the way they do, why he or she understands something the way they do. More importantly, I don't understand why you don't see how I feel about this, or I don't understand why you don't see this the way I do. And that happens an awful lot, and so it's my goal tonight to break that down. And I like this one. If you married someone just like yourself, then one of you is unnecessary. Well, that's kind of a humorous line to me. There are a lot of different ways you can think about that, of course, but it makes a serious point, and the point is there is benefit in having different perspectives, and I don't care how hard we try, we'll never find anybody that sees things always like I see them or you see them, and there's benefit to that. Several years ago, a really close friend of ours who teaches now at Harding and I were talking on the phone, and we were talking about something related to marriage. And Mike said, do you know what the first fight we had was after we got married? And I said, no, what was it? And he said, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? He said, Mike's fine with me sharing this story. He said, it was the morning after we married, and we were on our way to our honeymoon. And I said, oh, you got in a fight that early? And he said, yeah, we did. He said, it wasn't knockdown drag out, but he said, it got pretty touchy. And I said, what happened? And he said, I was driving down the road just as happy and in a place of bliss as I could be. And Nancy said, what are you thinking? And he said, oh, nothing. And she said, no, really, what are you thinking? And he said, really, I wasn't thinking anything. And she said, your eyes were open. If your eyes are open, you're thinking something. What are you thinking? He said, no, I promise, I really was not thinking anything. She said, what are you hiding from me? Well, if you know the two of them, you can especially understand that scenario. because he can be as laid back and put his brain in neutral and just coast through something as well as anybody I've ever seen. However, she is high-strung, she is energetic. You can see by looking at her eye movement that if she's awake, that brain is traveling 100 miles an hour. It is just constantly grinding. Now, he can park it, she can't. And in that moment, neither of them understood why the other one was like they are. Now, after almost 40 years of marriage, I'm pretty confident they get that way better than they did on morning one. But it's a really good example of how not only are men and women different, but two people in general oftentimes are very different. Now, I want to make the point tonight by showing a couple of sections of the same video. I'm going to apologize on the front end. I'm not considering this worship. This is a teaching moment. It gets a little silly, but oh how well it makes the point. And I think it's okay for us to enjoy this. So, watch and see where this goes.
We're going to start discussing men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right? Now, men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes.
All right, you with him so far? Our wives going, oh, how true is that, right? Yeah, absolutely. We can only focus on one thing. By the way, God very much, I believe, seriously, made the difference between man and woman in this way due to maternal instinct. And I'm very serious with that. And in fact, if you're around animals at all, you watch the difference between the mother and her offspring in cows or whatever. And there's something special. In fact, I'll run with that for a second. I was in a class in my doctoral program at the University of Memphis. The last class I took, forced to take, a radical feminist who had become the chair of the department taught the class that required all of us to take Understanding Women in Higher Education, a Feminist Approach. And radical feminists believe that differences between males and females are entirely learned, except for physiological differences. And so I was talking to Dr. Townsend one night, we were talking about this, and she made the statement, there's no difference that's not learned. And I said, I've got a question for you. I said, when a mama cow has a newborn calf, how does that 1 day old or 1 hour old calf know to go to the mama for nourishment instead of the bull? When did that calf learn that? And she said, I don't know, let me think about it and I'll get back with you. And I'm sure someday she will. There is something instinctive going on with maternal instinct, and I think there are characteristics involving paternal instinct as well that God gave us. But making the point early on, there are differences. Now, watch the next version.
Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car, and the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. It's like... It's like the internet superhighway, okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's just... It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. And she just loves it. Okay? Now, men, we have a box in our brain that most women are not aware of. This particular box has nothing in it. In fact, we call it the nothing box. And of all the boxes a man has in his brain, the nothing box is our favorite box. If a man has a chance, he'll go to his nothing box every time.
What do you think? Does it kind of make you laugh while you go, oh, wow, how true so many parts of that are? And I hate that he's as silly as he is. He's a comedian. That's his job. But, you know, how many times do we not understand each other when these kinds of things are going on and the single thought at a time or the nothing box? Yeah, you know, in fact, Tina and I had about 45 minutes to eat a while ago, and the waiter came up and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I need you to do me a favor. We don't have enough time to eat here tonight, but can you make it happen?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll do my best." And he did a great job of getting us in and out. But when he left, I told Tina, I said, "Right now, I just need to sit here and not think." You know, because I had been listening and pushing and, you know, trying to be attentive and help, and it's tiring. And man, I needed that nothing box. Well, she's seen me in that place long enough that she understood. Well, let's go to the more serious. And I want to point us to what Peter wrote in 1 Peter 3 and verse 7. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your own wives. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Now, I don't bring this verse to make a point out of the wives being the weaker vessel, as the King James Version said. I'm confident from studying this that the purpose here is Peter saying generally the female gender is physically weaker than the male gender for the purpose of showing that differences, innate differences exist. And we recognize that. Research and experience shows that to be true. But the point that Peter makes is we are different. Recognize that. Be respectful in it. And notice the last line in the verse. Peter even says to us as husbands, men, if you don't do that, if you're not respectful, if you're not careful in accepting the differences that exist, then you run the risk of endangering your prayer life. Now, that's a pretty serious implication to me. And it's important for me to understand that God wants me to accept and deal appropriately with the differences that we have. Now, look at it in this way. Life is better when we accept that people are different. Understanding that people are different is necessary for good relationships. Individuals have different personalities, different levels and types of emotions, different logical and mental processes, an easy one to understand, different levels of introversion and extroversion, different ways or means of communicating, different ways of understanding, and different needs. And what we're talking about tonight is a matter of respect. Understanding and accepting differences shows respect to one another. It is demeaning when someone looks down on me because I see something differently from them. Now I want you to think about this. It is so frustrating to us when we're having a conversation with someone and we make a statement and they don't agree with that statement, and the way they respond to us is by saying something that makes us feel like they're saying, can you say the stupid word in church? Oh, that's so stupid. Or, I can't believe you think that. Well, if we're talking religion, if we're talking house colors, if we're talking Ford or Chevrolet, if we're talking college football, we want to be able to have our opinions without other people making us feel like we are less than if we do so. And what I'll tell you is this. In fact, I'm going to just jump right straight to one of the main points I want to go tonight in a moment. But what I want to say is this. We're not going to spend much time around people who act like that to us, because it's disrespectful. Now, here's what I want to say, and I want to say it carefully, but I want to say it in such a way that we all think about it. I've had too much experience with too many couples where if I were to ask the wife, does the husband often enough treat you in a less than way such that you are hesitant to voice your opinion because of how he may respond? Now, this doesn't have to be a gender thing. Sometimes it's the other way around. I've seen women who would be the instigator in looking down on, in a mental and emotional way, her husband because of his opinion or because of his feelings or because of what he thinks. But just being real with you, happens way, way, way over and over again, going from the husband to the wife. Now, most of us as husbands don't want to be like this. And even for the husband that I see in the counseling room, who sometimes I want to go, watch it now. Do you realize how you just talked to her? Do you realize that you made her feel like how she feels and thinks doesn't matter? Even for that husband that will do it in the counseling room, when I ask him, do you want to disrespect her? He'll pull back and he'll go, no, I don't. And I don't think that's a dishonest answer. I think it's honest. And I think there are a lot of contributors to why we do this. But I want to ask you this question, and I'm kind of jumping way ahead, just running off course a little bit. But I want to go ahead and ask you the question. Are you comfortable in your relationship giving the other spouse the permission to tell you when you feel like they're disrespecting you? In other words, if the wives weren't here tonight, I would say, men, are you willing to give your wives permission so that if they feel like you're putting them down or being demeaning, whether you mean to or not, do you give them permission to tell you without you being defensive, without you explaining to them why they ought not to feel that way, if they feel that way, it should matter. And sometimes they'll misread. Sometimes there will be misunderstanding. I understand that. But even when that happens, I need to deal with it. I need to be considerate of how Tina feels. And if I'm not willing to give her permission to tell me that, oh, there are a lot of big things going on in this relationship that need to be dealt with. Now, I told you I was going to kind of jump in a big way, but if I just had one message I could give from this understanding that we think differently, that we are differently, it would be that one. Well, let's continue to develop as we go. We all realize that it's immature thinking to think everyone is like me, everyone should be like me, everyone sees things like I see them, my way is best always. I don't know of the most arrogant person in the world that would even make this statement. Because when we step back from a situation and when we pull the emotion out of it, we realize, oh no, I make mistakes all the time. I see things wrong all the time. And if I act as though I always am right, then yeah, there's a problem with immaturity. So what are some of the common areas where differences exist? First of all, personality. My schooling was such that we studied in the area of psychology all different types of learning inventories, psychological profiles. Probably the majority of us at one time or another have taken Myers-Briggs type inventory. I've taken so many of these and studied so many of them, they kind of wear me out, and I kind of don't even like hearing about them, other than I appreciate the fact that they make the point that I'm trying to make tonight, and that is people are different. Part of it's due to nature, part of it's due to nurture. Doesn't really matter where it comes from, but understanding and personality type is a big part of this. It affects how we think. It affects how social or lack thereof we are. It affects how we process information, how we learn, how we get along with others. And personality is largely innate. Another common area where differences exist, very rarely do marriages consist of two people who are always, in fact, I'll say never, always at the same place in their faith journey. And the majority, and in fact, if I were to stop and ask those of you who are married tonight, which one of you is the spiritual leader, I'm pretty confident 95% of you would give the same answer as you realize your place in terms of your faith as compared to your spouse. We usually know that and recognize that, which makes the point. We generally are at different places spiritually with our spouse due to different reasons. Sometimes that changes. But number 3, obviously this one involves differences. Men and women are created sexually very differently. And in fact, with being careful, based on the topic, I'll say this, and I think it is being careful. If we don't talk about our physical needs with each other, which probably is the most difficult conversation we will ever have with them because of the sensitive nature of it. But if we don't have those discussions, where that leaves us oftentimes is to do for them what they want us to do for them, or what we want them to do for us. Let me say that again. If we don't talk about it, what I will do in trying to take care of her needs is what I want her to do for me. And you see the problem with that, don't you? We're made differently. We're made completely differently. And if we don't acknowledge those differences, and if we don't talk about them, then those areas oftentimes will not be fulfilled. Another difference that exists, family background. My family would get together 3 or 4 times a year. We didn't have to live in the same town together. In fact, until my dad and we moved to Columbia in 2007. In our adult life, we'd never lived with any immediate family member, and we were okay with it. Now, it was harder on Tina than it was for me, because Tina's family was used to going to grandmother's every second or third Sunday, even 100 miles away. You know, the matter of, all right, well, our family eats together every Sunday. Are you kidding me? All of those things. Who cooks? Who does most of the cooking? Who takes care of the finances? Differences that we've got to learn to deal with successfully. Financial. It's very rare that both husband and wife are exactly at the same place on the spectrum in terms of their spending versus their saving. Sometimes that happens. But in the same way that I could ask usually which one is the spiritual leader, I could also ask which one tends to more so be the spender and which one tends to more so be the saver. And when I say that, most couples grin and look at each other because you know exactly who is which. Well, differences. Yeah, sure, almost always we've got to learn to deal with them. Well, let's go back and look at some of these. Personality types. How husbands and wives process information is often a significant issue when spouses are different and not getting along. Why? Because we don't understand the other one. It makes perfect sense to me to do it this way. And again, because of those innate things and because of those nurture things, things are different. And look at this one. This one is one that I talk about quite often from Freed Hardeman. I had an IT background, and having a birthday party with a bunch of techies and expecting them to celebrate and have fun just didn't happen. It was the driest get-together I've ever seen. Why? Because certain personality types usually are IT people, and IT people usually are so concrete, so black and white, so if-then thinkers, that there's very little gray matter anywhere. By the way, not only IT, engineers, accountants, am I stepping on a lot of toes now? Oh, we laugh at ourselves because we know it's true. In fact, let's go ahead to this picture. Now, several of you know Carter and Haley, our two. And if you look at those four people there, I don't remember, that was Gulf Shores or Orange Beach a few years ago when we were able to have our whole family on a vacation back when we could do that. And if you look at these, you've got me, and nobody in my family is like me. Nobody anywhere is like me. Nobody has ever used the name Barry, England, and the word normal in the same sentence. I get that. But then you have Tina. And Tina and I are so different in so many ways, thankfully. And then you have Haley, the one with the tongue sticking out of her mouth, and she saw the opportunity to be silly, and I don't know, I guess this is the only picture where she actually had her feet on the ground when the picture was taken, because that's Haley. And then you've got Carter, whose nickname while he was at Freed Hardeman was Grandpa, because Carter never had to have rules. He was the rule abider. When he was 5, he was more mature than his dad in a lot of his ways. And so you got four very different people. But I want to talk especially about the difference between Carter and Haley. So one night we were in 209 Buena Vista, and Haley and Carter were both going to be home from Freed Hardeman. And it was one of those special moments when Mom and Dad had the whole family together. And so it took them forever to get here. Finally, Friday night, 11 o'clock or so, the last one came in, and we had them both there, and it was still early for them. But we were willing to stay up because our kids were home. And so we were sitting around talking, and Mom says, tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, we're going to eat supper. And I'm going to fix each of your favorite meals for tomorrow night. I don't care how late you sleep in the morning. I don't care what you do tomorrow. You all do whatever you want to do. But at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, I want both of you to be at the table. And Tina looked at Haley and she said, Haley, 6 o'clock. And we all thought, oh, wow, you think that'll happen? Because as Tina put it growing up, Haley's name was not Haley, it was Hurry Haley. Because she just always tended to be a little late. And so, now before we go to bed, Haley, whatever you want to do, 6 o'clock. So the next day comes, they are out and about. Haley slept late, Carter probably did. And so at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, I'm at the patriarch's place at the head of the table in the dining room. Carter is to my left. There's an empty seat to my right, and Tina is in her chair next to Haley's seat. And so we look at each other like, and so 6:01 came, and 6:02 came. And Carter's looking at his phone or his watch, and I'm looking at mine, and 6:03, and 6:04. You know, and if you're frustrated, truly frustrated, every minute that passes exponentially makes that worse. You know what I mean? And so finally at 6:06, the basement door opens. Haley comes busting up the steps, comes in, sees the food, hugs Mom, sits down, and says, "Oh, this looks great." Well, by that time, there were 3 people who were in stewing mode. And Carter says, "You're late." And Haley said, "I'm not late." And Carter said, "Are you kidding me? You're late." And Haley said, "Why do you say I'm late?" And he said, 6:06 is not 6 o'clock. And Haley looks at me and she says, "Dad, why is he ruining this for everybody?" Now, I got a question for you. Which one of the 2 of them was right? Now, your personality type is going to help determine how you answer that. And in fact, jumping to Haley, in a way, she was right. It was a neat opportunity. And yeah, we needed to be patient, but man, why let something like that ruin it when we had the opportunity just to enjoy the moment? However, this is the one that needs to catch our attention. If you are wired like me, and if you're wired like my son, you cannot get off the focus of who in their right mind would try to argue that 6:06 and 6 o'clock are the same. That's insane. Why in the world would anybody? So, again, who's right? Depends on how you're wired. It depends on differences. Now, for the record, I'm very proud of Haley. She works really hard to be on time, way more than she used to. But part of it with her was, look, there are things more important than whether or not you're 5 or 6 minutes late for something. And part of me, a very, very little part, but part of me has to agree with her when I step back and take a look at it. Now, you see why I gave the story. I enjoy telling it. It's fun. But it makes the point very well, and that is you got 2 different people who think differently, who see things differently. And let me go ahead and say this, and I'll come back to it with the slides. But while I'm here and I'm rambling tonight, let me just keep going with it. If we tend to be those black and white thinkers, if we tend to be the ones that make lists of pluses and minuses, if we tend to be the if-then thinkers, when we have gone through the logical process of getting to the bottom line, anybody who doesn't get to the same bottom line that we got to is wrong. Why? Because you can't trump logic. You cannot trump logic. And when we are so logically driven that we have used it to get to the bottom line, then we think that anybody who comes up with a solution different from that must be wrong. You know what the problem with that is? The problem with that is whether we're programming or accounting or whatever, sometimes when we go through our logic processes because of being distracted, because of a mistake, because of something else, our bottom line doesn't match where it needs to match. Why? Because I don't care how logical we are, we're not always right. And if we tend to think I'm more logical than her or I'm more logical than him, and if he or she disagrees with me, nothing works better than logic. How can you argue with that? Then we tend to discount how they feel and what they think, and in the process they walk away hurt because we've been disrespectful to them. And careers often play into how well we respect different opinions. When we are managers at work, when we have positions of authority, when we are the ones that large numbers of people come to on a daily basis to have us problem solve and make decisions, we tend to feel of ourselves that we're better at doing that than other people. The problem is, too many times we go home and we take that with us and we don't flip that switch off. And if our spouse has a different opinion than us, we think, well, we're the ones that are good at it. Why are you differing with me? Be careful about that. I had a couple several months ago. She was a nurse. He was politically and emotionally against everything related to COVID, frustrated him, vaccinations, and I'm not meaning to get into that. I won't talk one way or the other. However, what I will tell about that is she was not vaccinated because he felt so strongly and so adamantly about it. She was scared to be vaccinated because of how he would treat her. Now, that may sound to be excessive to you, but I'm telling you, we can be like that without realizing we're like that if we're not careful. And the whole point that I'm preaching pretty hard to us tonight is to say, man, it's so easy to become that person without realizing it. And what about the communication differences? Being able to communicate and help my spouse understand that we are different is important. Picking the right time and the right way to discuss is important. If the difference has become heated enough that listening is not going to work, that's the wrong time to say, I feel like you're disrespecting me. Well, it's too late at that point. Pick the right moment to have these discussions about, hey, it's okay for us to see things differently. I may see it differently a week from now than I do now, but right now, it's really the way I feel. And sometimes we try at the wrong time to convey that. Males and females, as I've mentioned, have very different sexual needs. For males, sexual needs are typically much more physical needs, and for females, sexual needs are typically more intimacy and emotional needs. Typically, in a sexual relationship, women have far greater needs of needing to be needed, needing to be loved, needing to be respected. And when those three things are missing, sexual relationship usually is not going to be very good. So what is the goal of all this? The goal of all this is to be okay with my spouse seeing something differently from me without automatically thinking he or she is wrong. My way is better. He or she should see it like I do, and I'll not be content until she gets to that point. Sometimes we can wear our spouses out. And so what happens so often in that situation is we won't give up until they finally have nothing left and they give in and we feel better because we got our way, and they leave feeling disrespected and hurt. Oh, that happens so often. Oh, how careful we need to be about it. We should be able to say to our spouses, you are more important to me than anything we may differ over. Now, I could make an exception to that if we're talking about some spiritual or moral things. That's not where I'm going with that. Where I'm going with that is so many times the things that we differ over are so petty and compared to what our relationship is and how much we should mean to each other. And if in the middle of that difference and if in the middle of that frustration something were to happen to cause one of us to suddenly lose the other one, all of a sudden that difference would be at the point of zero in terms of its importance. Why? Because it gets us back to what really matters, what's really in there. And oh, how sometimes we get distracted. And so I want to encourage you as couples tonight to talk about it. At some point in the next day or two, ask each other, how are we different? What did Barry talk about tonight that causes us to see things differently? And I'll tell you, and again, I'll be a little personal, Tina and I especially had a lot to learn in understanding we think differently. And our processes of understanding are very different. And when you do a good job of figuring that out, you can kind of get to the point where you laugh about it instead of letting it destroy you. You can talk about your differences, and I can't believe you saw it that way. Are you kidding me? Yeah, well, I'm a certain type or I'm a certain type. And it's not threatening to us anymore. We understand that there's benefit in seeing and understanding things differently. Not always perfectly, but I'll tell you, effort in recognizing what we're talking about tonight makes a difference. So add that to your marriage formula and talk about your differences. Better yet, acknowledge them. Tonight we offer the invitation. If you need to respond asking for the prayers of the church or to become a child of God, or if this church can help you in any way and responding would be appropriate, we encourage you to do so while we stand and sing.